Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Manage to Retain. This is a series where we want to delve into the workplace to understand some of the things that are happening and how you could potentially head them off by just getting some insights, perspective, and data so that you can stop them from occurring, stem the bleeding. And I always do this show with my two friends, Sherri and Lou. Sherri and Lou, how are you all doing today?
I'm doing good. Glad to be back.
Yeah, and we were talking, Sherri and Lou, myself, we're talking about a topic that I feel like is, at least I'll say myself personally, I've gone into the workplace in my past, even though it may have been a good boss at the beginning. Over time, I just started to get a little charged up, and I started to get a little ticked off is probably the word, maybe disengaged. I think we've heard a little bit of that happening in recent months and years. Sherri and Lou, have you all heard any of that happening recently?
Well, it's common.
Oh yeah,
It's common. I mean, there's a lot of that, and it stems from a few things. But I'm sure that one of those or two of those we'll talk about today. I think that it's a very common feeling and a common occurrence.
And I think we always are quick to assume that the other side has got the responsibility. I think we all know better than that, but it's tough to be objective when you're the one in the middle of the situation. I'm fantastic giving advice, terrible taking my own.
Yeah.
And this whole idea, conflicts in the workplace or employee communications, I think is the category that I'd like to talk about today. Is that a topic that, I mean, as leadership coaches, you all see that all the time. So could you all introduce yourself and tell people and maybe even share with us a little bit of a story about this conflict in the workplace and employee communications?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. Well, for starters, I'm Sherri, this is Lou, and we are a husband and wife duo, and we are the Lou Everett Group, and we are business and executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. And what we love to do is really help our clients get from where they are to where they where they intend to be by them becoming more aware of their stuckness and really utilizing our systematic approach. We have almost 5 decades combined of experience working in the corporate world, as well as being in our business, since 2005, even our first business way back then. So a combination of that and what we see on a day-to-day basis.
And when it comes down to what you had mentioned, and which we can talk about here, but you had asked about a story when it comes to this topic of communicating or conflict, because they really interrelate, right? They kind of intermingle. I'm a firm believer that conflict, any conflict that's been created is because of something that has caused it within the communication structure, whether it's the approach of communication, words that were possibly used or not used for that matter, and what was said or what was not said. Conflict over decades and centuries of time, we can, in this country alone, we can look at it and say, well, if this was communicated this way, that war could have been avoided or it could have been lessened. We know of those types of situations in life in general. But now if we dumb that down into our business, our leadership capability, how we connect with people and how we communicate with our employees can make or break our team. It could change the dynamics of the team. It can reduce or increase conflict. So it just shows that is an extreme importance. We have had clients come to us, and the first thing they'll say is, we need communication training big time. And conflict resolution, if you can fit it in. And one of our first questions is, okay, great. What happened that caused you to want to call us and need this training? Because something's happened.
Yeah. Well, let me introduce you to me. My name is Vinay Raman. I'm the CEO of Carmo, and I build stories, the emotional stories of people and employees in your organization, maybe even customers, just using the data that you have within. So you can start to see some of this conflict and some of the emotion and in the emotionally charged situations, people, teams, regions, departments, organizations. You can see it before it comes to be. And it's because we're able to weave the story together with the data. So I want to propose an idea here. And then as we usually take a look at data in a graph, but I want to do a little bit of a role play here today where I'll be the employee. So I'll introduce the graph first and we'll talk about a situation. And I'll be the employee. You all are the boss. There's two of you sitting at the table, and I feel like I'm being a little ambushed here. So I'm probably in the defensive mode, which I think might be a real conversation that's happened in the past, right? So you've got ownership and you've got someone from HR, which is when you know it's a really serious conversation, right? Right. So is that okay if I'll go ahead and share my screen and maybe we can use that as the place to start?
Sure.
All right. Can you all see my screen okay?
Sure can. Yeah.
All right. So let me talk you through this. On the outside of this graph here, this is a radar graph. Anything on the outside is doing really good. So if the blue area reaches the outside, like here, it's doing really well. On this side, this employee is doing really well. So you want that blue area to be as big as possible. The gray area is how the average employee is doing in this organization. And anything that's towards the center means that's where they're less effective. So highly effective on here, that they get an A+ or 100 on the exam. And here in the middle, you're not doing so well. You're much less effective in that role. You're probably getting closer to a 0 on that test or exam. So what we're looking at here as an employee is we're kind of starting to see that they're excelling in certain areas when their callback ratio, as in how many times they're being called back to do a job again because they didn't do it right. They're actually doing quite well, quite a bit better than the average employee. Mm-hmm. How their tech share, and what this means is how much of the role that they're responsible for, they're picking up the slack and doing their jobs. And days of service, they're working hard. They're doing lots of work. They're doing significantly better than other people. So they're showing up for work. They're doing their work. But once we start looking at some of these other dimensions, the service revenue on an average basis, the highest service revenue days that they've had, the lowest service revenue days, and how many times they've been called back into how you adjust that revenue, the story doesn't look as good anymore. It seems like this employee, while you can see some of these things that they've done well, because of maybe some contextual factors, some conditions that have been placed on them, there's probably some frustration here that this employee is feeling here. And this has probably been welling up for a little while. So if I've been just invited in as this particular employee, I've been invited into an office and I'm coming in to see, and I'm Vinay, as the employee coming to see Sherri and Lou, because they just invited me in for a meeting. Hey, Sherri. Hey, Lou. What's happening?
All right. Doing all right, Vinay?
Yeah. What's up? Why'd you all call me in here?
Well, I mean, there was a couple things. I mean, Sherri was just telling me that she was knocked off her feet on how hard you work. I mean, look at, and I want to show you this graph real quick of we're able to pull some data, and it just really impressed me when she pointed this out. So if you take a look here at this graph, just kind of measures overall every employee. It's not just you. Everyone gets to see this, and we get to see their how well you work in certain areas. And if you look at the days of service here, Sherri pointed out to me that this is an indicator of just how hard you are. So I just wanted, number one, to thank you for that, your dedication to that, and to help out other people, because your average tech share is just out of sight, which means that you're not just doing your job, you're helping other people too. So I just wanted to say good job there.
Thanks. I didn't even know anybody paid attention to that stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes we don't, and that's on us. But today I was informed, and I thought this was just, it blew my mind. Now, out of curiosity, on the other things that you see on this graph, what are your thoughts? I know you just recently had a couple of managers meetings that you were a part of, and so I just want our goal here is just to kind of align that together to see how you're feeling about what you're seeing here on the different layers of this graph, and what perhaps you're being told, or what communication that you have coming down to you on these items as well. So that way we can all be on the same page and what I can do to support you. So what are your thoughts here on the other items on this graph?
Actually, I got a couple of questions, because I do feel like I'm working pretty hard, but I see some of these numbers over here. I mean, if I understand these correctly, I don't want my numbers to be this low on the callback adjusted revenue and lowest service revenue. All those numbers are kind of low on this right-hand side here. Why are they so low? I don't why is that happening? Do you know what's happening there?
No, that's a very good question. And it's really on us to kind of identify what that is. And that's why we're sitting here kind of together with you, because we'd like to kind of get some insight on that. How are when you've been meeting regularly, right, with the managers and your team, like doing team meetings, what has been the current topic of conversation on those meetings? Like what has been the push, right? We all get pushed. And so I'm just curious to see your take on that. What do you feel is the current push and for everyone on the team to really do better in, if you wouldn't mind letting me know that.
Yeah. So I feel like I hear this thing that people keep talking about being a team player. And I feel like I do a lot of the team player stuff, but then there's other people who, and I mean, I feel like I'm working harder than they are, but they're getting on the leaderboard and I'm just not.
I see.
And that, I gotta tell you that I just, I feel like I keep trying harder, but I'm not getting anywhere.
Well, I mean, you're definitely getting somewhere, because without you, it wouldn't really have the success we're having especially in our customer service space, because you're doing really, really well there. So we need that, and you're doing great there, and we need you as part of that. Now, out of curiosity, if as you see that the areas of opportunity are in the revenue space on driving revenue, what we would normally, you might hear it called sales, right? Get your numbers up. I'm sure you've heard that by your manager. Yeah. Now, when your manager tells you that, what do you think it means when they're encouraging you to get your numbers up? Because that might be the answer we're looking for here, to see what we can do to help you get on that leaderboard.
I don't know. I mean, I thought I'd just kind of put my head down and work harder and just work as many days as I can. But
you're definitely doing that.
Yeah.
And that's good.
But it seems like that's not where I need to be. It seems like I need some help understanding what to do better.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. That helps us too, so we know what direction to help you. Now there's another team member that you've connected with, and you see you've worked with him before, you've helped him out, and he has some struggles with the customer service side. Like you're a rock star on that, and I'm wondering, do you think you can pair up with him, and I'm sure you'd be willing to help him out with that. And he has some really good tips and techniques that he's using on the revenue side of it. I think that together, if you work together on this and pair together, that you both can really strengthen one another and both really get rock stars on the leaderboard there. Is that something that you'd be willing to try out?
That sounds actually great. I mean, I didn't know who to ask or what to do. So I thought being a good employee is just kind of putting my head down and just doing what I'm told to do. But if there's somebody who can make me better, I think that's actually interesting to me.
Excellent. Well, we'll get that set up. And I want to make sure that you understand that. And Sherri and I were talking about this, and we're also going to meet with your manager, because it's not really the first time we've heard that the focus seems to be a lot on getting the amount of working really hard, getting the days work, focusing on how many days you work, and also focusing on customer service, because that's really important, which is true. But it seems like that seems to be the main message on your team, as opposed to also rounding that out with the revenue side, which might be another reason why you might be struggling here. So we're going to work with your manager too and get them involved in this, the pairing with you and this other employee, to help you, so that we can make sure that the messaging remains steady as well, so that you're all getting the same message and that you're also getting the same support that you need to be on that leaderboard. Does that sound like something that would help kind of bridge this gap a little bit with you?
I got to tell you, I was actually really scared to walk into this meeting. I didn't know what you guys were going to meet with me for, and I was actually really pretty worried. And this actually makes me really happy that I think I know how to do better here. And before, I don't think I did, and I didn't know who to ask. And thank you for helping me.
Of course. I mean, for now, you're an important part of this team, and whatever we can do to help you, that's what we're here for. So let us know if you need anything else on this support. We'll continue to monitor and you do the same thing, and we'll get you where you want to be.
So maybe we break out of role playing here for a second. How did that? I mean, we just kind of did an off the cuff role play there, where I was the employee and you all were the leadership team. Do you feel like that's how more conversations could go?
Well, most definitely. I mean, a lot of which is common is that we, as managers, as leaders, we tend to look at always the bottom, right? And we had this a couple of weeks ago too, same conversation. We go right for the, get-go and right for the bottom half and those opportunities and what can we do? What can we do? When we forget, look at all the positives. So it's just flipping the script, so to speak, and say, listen, I'm like, you have done great in X, Y, and Z. Fantastic. How do you feel on that? Right? And like get that, you got to get that buy-in, right? I mean, yes, there's always opportunities, but let's not lead in with those opportunities. People are already feeling angst as it is when they talk to a manager. They already feel overwhelmed. They already have their own stuff going on, whatever it may be. So let's kind of ease into in a way of let's lead in with the positive and then have a conversation and actually have that person see the opportunities first, depending on the conversation and what, data, for example, just like, well, what do you think about these other things? And then it instead of us telling them, it's more like, oh, wow, like I'm seeing this for the first time, or, hey, I didn't even know that my numbers were this much of an opportunity. So there's just a different dynamic and an approach. That's all.
We did approach this one as if it may have been the first time that we had a conversation, right? Mm-hmm. There's many other avenues. The difficult conversations have to occur. We have to have those if that employee was. We've had these conversations. We've set them up for success. We equip them. We provide the nurturing that's necessary, and we're still having this conversation. Then it needs to become more of a straightforward conversation of, you've got this amount of time. Now we get into other types of conversations that might require an HR situation, and those have to happen. But if we look at this situation as we did here, if we separate this, Vinay, we've got Vinay, you walked into two of us. First of all, walking into a manager and a meeting that even in this case where I set the stage where I'm not even the direct manager. I might even have been somebody who was higher up than that person, or maybe not been connected at all, but can somehow connect the dots. I had to do two things right off the bat. I had to make sure first that we connected with Vinay. We need to connect with the employee. And that I also set it up to where one of us was on their side. Eventually, at the end of it, both of us were on their side, and they realized that. But right away, I said, Sherri pointed out something really amazing about your work. Now, no matter what I say, he knows that now somebody is on his side. And then I brought him into the circle instead of having him be on the outside of the circle. Now it's more engaging, more opportunity to actually bring up some points with him.
I'll tell you just personally, I mean, most every role that I've ever worked in, I've actually done quite well in my role. And still today, I still remember the feeling that throughout my professional career working for others, no matter how well I did, no matter how good the ratings were, every time the boss called me into the office, I was always a little worried. And I could have been hitting a grand slam every single day. Megan, that boss looked like a superhero. But yet every single time I walked into that office, I immediately walk in going, did something just happen that I'm going to get the axe today?
You think of all the things that you think you did wrong, right? It's like going down to it's the going down to the principal syndrome. You know what I mean? Like you only go down there just for something negative or something happens, and something's going to happen.
Well, it seems last minute to you when you are asked to go to a meeting with your manager. It always seems like a last minute thing. So there's got to be something wrong. And that's another thing we can do as managers to have a preliminary connection or communication with our employees and say, hey, listen, I'm meeting with some folks on our team this week to show you some pretty amazing numbers and pretty amazing areas on this new graph we're using that I'd love to get your perspective on to see how you're doing. I'll be meeting with you at some point this week. So if you get a notification for a meeting. That's what it's for. Now, all of a sudden, it alleviates that. Not that it, and in leadership, a lot of times, like, well, it doesn't matter. I got to call them in anyway. It does matter.
Yeah, it does.
The approach. Right?
It's the approach, right? Do you want them to come in already with a barrier, or do you want them to come in open? There's a big difference there. It makes your messaging a lot easier to give.
Yeah, no, I mean, my kids are playing out in the street, and then I'll, it's dinner time. I've called them a couple of times, and I go out and I say, "Kid," I go to my son and my daughter and say, "Hey, inside now." It's usually I've done something right. Instead, if you had given them, "Hey, I'm going to be calling you in 15 minutes," it kind of just diffuses that situation.
Yeah.
So, but let's reflect maybe a little more on this kind of situation where instead of that having to be a hostile conversation where both sides are kind of coming in saying, we're going to come and butt heads. There's a couple of strategies in there that we saw. But I think what I appreciated about the way you did this, you said, "Hey, let me share something with you from the way I'm looking at this," right? You shared this graph. You could print it out, put it in front of them, bring it up on your computer screen. Now, all of a sudden, it's not about your interpretation versus my interpretation. It's now, "Hey, this is a fact. This is what's happening. What do you see?" And that's what you did. You say, "Look, I saw a couple of things here. What do you see?" And it gave me a couple moments to get off the defensive and start to say, what's going on here, right? And I get to think about it for a little bit and sort of internalize for myself, what am I feeling about the situation? I think that's a super important word there.
It is. Absolutely right. It again brings them into the circle. We're all in the same, we're all in this together, but it's a matter of, I'm going to point out, getting them involved in this communication.
Yeah.
Because most of the time people are aware of where they are lacking if they can see it.
Versus being told.
Right.
And it puts people on a defensive, just what you said, that if you already go right for the negative, it really puts that guard up.
We could have said the same thing a different way.
Yeah.
We could have very well said, "Hey, Vinay, yeah, you're doing great in customer service, but unfortunately you're having a very difficult time in the revenue side of it. What's going on?"
And you asked me what, I think you tried to ask me a couple of times, different ways, what I saw, what was happening. And I trying to play into that role a little bit. I was trying to be a little elusive in the answer because I was scared what you were trying to get at, right? You were just waiting for me to trip up on something so that you can say, "Hey, leave your badge, get out," right? But by the end, I was looking at it from a point of view, wait, hold on a second. They're not trying to throw a spear at me. They're trying to figure out why the spears are coming at me. And now all of a sudden, since you're on my side, even just trying to play into that role, I'm sitting there thinking this idea that I don't want to say the fired word. I was coming in here today. I didn't know what to expect. So I changed my words there because I will tell you, just in playing that role, I said, I don't think this is a situation where I would want to use the word. I was thinking that I was going to come in here and get fired because I don't want that thought to go across your mind either. And we navigated past that where the fired thing doesn't even come up at all. So,
right.
I got to imagine this type of conversation happens in companies. Well, this type of conversation could happen in companies every day, thousands of times every day, but it doesn't go this way. It becomes a difficult conversation that probably neither party likes or enjoys or wants to be part of.
A lot. That's funny. We just had a phone call with a client that just signed on with us. Is they were given their reviews from their employees are really high, but then internally, their employees are getting written up for things like that could have been fixed by communicating this way. That the HR is like, well, did you not communicate this to that? Well, we did. Well, but how did you do it? You're like, do you have to go right to the write-ups? You have to go right to, hey, all that does is diminish the value of somebody unless you have already attempted and provided as many avenues as possible to develop those people. So this is a very hot topic. It's a big hot topic. And you're right. If these types of strategies, just this one that we taught, this example was made up of probably a good 10 or 15 strategies built into just this one little scenario. But if we could implement those in some way in our company and our teams every day, you will see a significant difference and the impact that it has on the HR department, number one, and in your reviews with your employees, you will retain more people. Yeah. You will retain more people because they'll want to stay because of how you're valuing them.
So talk to me about principles. You've got the 10 principles that you all use. What are the principles that you think kind of you can employ here, or maybe you might want to highlight here in terms of what occurred?
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, we have the 10 principles that we believe that every leader must follow to lead with influence. And we know that leading with influence, that alone says a lot, right? Because that's how we're going to get things accomplished the way we want them to get accomplished, is by how we influence those people. And we want to influence them in a positive way, right? And we tell this analogy a lot. We unintentionally, the average person unintentionally influences 10,000 people in their lifetime. That's without doing it on purpose. So imagine if you purposely did it, focusing on it and intentionally made it your focus to positively influence other people. As a leader, we need to do that. And a couple of principles based on in here, we mentioned a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. The nurturing?
The nurturing principle is definitely a big one.
Nurturing one.
The nurture principle and the equipping principle.
Because we gave a solution in the situation that we role played. You pointed out a really good solution, whereas you took one individual that was really good at the revenue and paired them with this individual, which was you and I, that was really good in the customer service portion of it. And then the other person wasn't as strong. So you just take the strengths of two individuals that could complement one another. And that was a really good solution.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The nurture principle.
Nurture and you're equipping.
And equipping them. Yeah, because you're providing them the equipment necessary to get better. Right, which might mean another employee. I'm going to throw another one, and we haven't talked about yet, and that's the time principle. You know, it's just, and we talk about this, and the subheading under the time principle is don't buy into the myth, because the whole myth is that you can manage time. Well, you can't manage time; you can only manage you. It's about self-management, not time management. And as leaders, we say back, well. Then you might have seen that scenario and said to yourself, well, I don't have the time to sit down with every employee to do that. Well, I didn't say to sit down with every employee to do that. You sit down with the employees you're concerned about and do that. And the other employees, you also have to take the time for, but there might be different ways to do that. The point being, is I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Oh, I just don't have time to equip them like you're saying to equip them. Well, if you don't take the time out and manage you, so you have the ability to manage those people and set the example for your managers. In that scenario, I was a manager that was managing the manager, and yet I was setting the example of how to do this and how to get the manager involved. If you cannot do that, then who says that you can lead other people? The reality of it is you can't if you can't lead yourself first. So the time principle, I want to make sure we emphasize on this one as well.
Well, I think a good analogy to the time principles, if anyone who's listening in has ever tried to buy real estate and just waited. You buy it and one day it's $100 a square foot, and you wait 1 year, it's $110. And you say, I'll wait for it a good time. And then all of a sudden it's $185 a square foot. I said, gosh, I wish I had bought it 7 years ago. There's no better time than right now. It just becomes more expensive. Always becomes more expensive.
It's true. Very true.
So for anybody who's been listening, and hopefully you enjoyed this new version here where we did a role play and walked through a situation where you can change what could be potentially a really difficult conversation, because you look at the graph and you see how ineffective an employee is on a number of different dimensions. And that comes from the data that you already have in your company. You get this graph that shows you what it is. But instead of having to be a difficult conversation, I always think of, let's flip the script so it's no longer difficult, but it's a collaborative conversation. I think those are the opposites of each other, right? I hear people all the time talk about difficult conversations. Don't need to do difficult conversations. I choose not to. I don't want to have any difficult conversations if I can help it, and I'm getting pretty darn good at it.
That's right.
So let's shift away from difficult conversations. Having the data and some of the approaches that Sherri and Lou shared with us today can allow you to get there. So thank you for listening in. Hopefully you see kind of what this can look like. Sherri and Lou, if anyone wants to hear more about some of the principles that you have or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks. Yes. Reach out on our website, loueverettgroup.com. Our phone number is there. Reach out to us, and we do have a link to set up to conversation. So we'd love to talk with you, but we are on LinkedIn and Facebook as well as Instagram.
And if you want graphs like that or want to see examples of graphs like that, my name is Vinay Raman at Carmo, CAARMO. You can reach us at carmo.com, or you can find us on me or the company on LinkedIn. Sherri and Lou, thanks so much. This was fun doing a role play today.
You bet. You bet. Thanks, Vinay.